And I loved the guy. He was a great guy. But he approached me at the beginning of a shift. I came in for a day shift, and I was going to work a double that day because every shift I worked after March of 2021 was a double, basically, because we were having such an increase in patient admissions.
Not in 2020, but in 2021.
In 2020, I was being canceled and sent home because there were so few patients that the hospital didn't need staff. And because I was in graduate school, I took those options.
This is Bay Area.
Correct.
Kaiser.
Correct.
Huge hospital.
Huge hospital.
But we've been told on TV
Yes.
that hospitals are packed.
Yes. So this is another one of the reasons. So besides the hospital protocols, so the hospital protocols were for COVID. We went over that. They made no rational sense. I told you 2 of the factors. There were more. The medication, the antiviral that they were giving, remdesivir, they've changed the name of it since then. But that medication, it's so insane when I talk about, I'm just like, how could we do this? That medication had a 53% death rate in clinical trials.
53.
53. So what they did is they reformatted it. They lowered the dose, and then they did a new clinical trial so they could try and show that it was safe and effective for COVID patients. So it didn't kill as many people with the COVID clinical trials as it did with the Ebola clinical trials. But get this, that medication, the reason, so in the Ebola clinical trials where they used remdesivir, that drug had a 53% death rate. All those patients died from, guess what? 2 conditions. Liver failure and renal failure. Do you know what all my patients from COVID were dying from? They were recovering from COVID, and then they were dying from liver failure or renal failure. So that was another thing that really woke me up. So that's more along the lines of the protocols and
so
how...
you treated one, what caused the other problem?
What's that?
So you treated COVID?
So that could be argued as well. So in medical school and in nursing school, both of us, all of these practitioners are told that you do not administer an antiviral more than 48 to 72 hours post symptom onset, because the risks of side effects from antivirals outweighs the benefit. So COVID patients, right? Remember, we were all being told, go home, do nothing.
Right.
Okay, so that was the first crime against humanity. Never in the history of medicine has a doctor ever told a patient to go home and do nothing. Never. Go home, take Tylenol, take high-dose vitamin C, there were a whole slew of things. Do some respiratory cleanouts, right? Right? Okay, so that is what every ethical doctor for the whole history of medicine does when we have patients who are sick, regardless of what they're sick with. You treat the symptoms. So patients weren't, the reason I bring that up is because patients weren't coming into the hospital because they were told to go home and hide until you couldn't breathe anymore. And then once you can't breathe, then you come into the hospital and we'll treat you, okay? So by the time they got to the hospital, most of them were between 8 and 10 days post-symptom onset, which is so far outside of the window for administering an antiviral. So we're only supposed to give an antiviral in the first 3 days. Now we got people coming in 8 to 10 days. The virus is gone. The reason that they were going into respiratory distress was because of the inflammation that we were talking about earlier. Because the virus, that spike protein, had caused so much cellular damage. The body was so inflamed that their lungs were shutting down. So they were in respiratory distress. They weren't able to oxygenate because of the spike protein's inflammatory damage on the system. They didn't need an antiviral. They needed steroids. They needed high doses of vitamin C. They needed supportive measures, and they weren't getting that. They were getting remdesivir, which had a clinical study proof of causing organ failure. And it's known not to administer after 3 days post-symptom onset. So there were all of these reasons why we weren't supposed to be doing any of the things that the COVID protocols were telling us to do, but we were being forced to do them. So the hospital didn't do these protocols. The federal government would revoke funding. The hospital doctors would become under review for not following the best practice protocols. So we all had our hands tied. And I give that to my colleagues. We did have our hands tied. There was a level of this to where my colleagues really felt forced to do what they were being told to do. And that's the sad part about the medical system, is that we no longer have practitioners who are able to access and utilize their education to do what they were trained to. They're just being pushed in as bots to do what they're told. So that's what went
Even
down.
if it goes against science.
Well, yeah, and it did. And it's funny because they'll say that it didn't, and they'll say that they have the science, but I analyzed the science that they were trying to push on us. And then I saw the other science that they were trying to hide from us. And they were not following the science from day one. All of that started within 1 week of the rollout of the COVID vaccine to the public. So she was witnessing, I was witnessing, both of us independently contacted our management and said, hey, we're seeing a dramatic increase in drug side effect. We need to document this so that it can be recorded and researched. My friend, she was actually told, if you report these side effects, we will fire you. I was told, no. We can't report those because we cannot prove that they are being caused by the vaccines. I was receiving 3 to 4 phone calls a day from my staffing department begging me to come to work every single day. What does that mean? They were desperate for staff. This hospital has had 3 times more admissions than we've ever had since the hospital opened their doors. I went and spoke to all of our city officials publicly, and I told them what was happening in the hospitals, and I informed everybody about the things that nobody wanted to report on, and I got silenced there too. Do you know how many people I met who they themselves or their partners were targeted and destroyed for curing cancer? A practitioner who was curing cancer, they didn't want him to continue working because his work was changing the world, so they set him up. Videos planted on his computer.
Child porn.
Yes, I am of value enough to tell the truth no matter what the cost.